there. This is Elizabeth and Eleanor. We're super bummed that we can't present in person and be with everyone, but we did just want to share the work that we've been doing the past few weeks on accessibility and the hiring process. So I'll just let Eleanor jump right into it.
So we chose to focus specifically on the legal hiring process, which is the process that law firms use to recruit new attorneys right out of law school. We wanted to focus on this particular industry because we feel it presents the opportunity for a really good critique of hiring in general. Many industries want to hire someone who they see as fitting the mold of an imagined perfect candidate. Someone who's hardworking and works well in a team and who can pull in clients and give amazing presentations. Sometimes these ideas don't always overlap with the job description or the job responsibilities. These firms may be looking for the perfect worker in general, maybe not the perfect lawyer or consultant or analyst or the person to do that specific job. We saw this very acutely in the legal recruiting process. Additionally, the world of private law firms is very traditional and very slow to change. The hiring process focuses very heavily on self-presentation and on stamina, but these aren't the only things you need to be a good attorney. Lastly, law is a field that is currently very focused on expanding diversity, but firms define diversity in terms of race, gender, and sexuality and very rarely include disability in these conversations. So what does this process actually entail? For 2 weeks before they start their second year of law school, law students interview with many firms to find a summer associate position for the following summer. If they do well in that position, they may get a return offer to come start their law career there after graduation. So a process that they go through after their first year of law school determines the next several years of their employment. Additionally, some firms only hire from a select group of schools. So the more prestigious the school, the more firms want you and the more interviews you may be asked to go through. Firms will work with the schools to set up on-campus interview programs. This is a 2-week period where literally all students do is first-round interviews. They can have around a dozen 20-minute interviews per day. Some students will get callback interviews. This is where they go to the firm's office and do several, usually 30-minute interviews with even more attorneys at the firm. Around half of those people will get an offer from the firm. The firm I worked at over the summer had around 3,000 applicants in our system by the end, and that was in order to fill an associate class of only 96 people. It's an incredibly selective and stressful process that students are expected to devote their full time to. So what are these firms looking for when they're hiring these people? One law firm lays out their ideal candidate as having 6 criteria: communication skills, interest in the firm, achievement drive, client service excellence, leadership, and professional brand. Another firm lists in their job posting that they seek outstanding academic credentials, excellent writing and research skills, strong work ethic, and the drive to foster strong client relationships. These criteria are, for the most part, pretty predictable for a law firm. Of course, a firm wants to hire someone that's interested in the work they do, and of course, they want them to be committed to the firm's clients, which is their business. And of course, they want them to work hard as well. However, the way that people can succeed at meeting those criteria can look really different from person to person. This search process also requires a lot of stamina. The amount of information a person is expected to remember about any firm is pretty large, and the number of firms that they'll interview with is also high. Being able to maintain a certain presentation and outward image during this very stressful time is expected of these students. And there's a very specific way that these candidates are expected to present themselves. This imaginary perfect lawyer shows up repeatedly in how we express our cultural conceptions of a lawyer. And this imaginary candidate is charming and cool and interacts perfectly, and that role is self-reinforcing. Attorneys tend to hire that person over and over again. This is a clip from a popular TV show that we think exemplifies this point.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Done. We're gonna need to streamline this. Give each guy a hard time. Before you send them back, give me a wink if they say something clever. Cool?
Okay. What are you looking for?
Another me.
So this is from the pilot episode of the TV show Suits, which is a show that focuses on corporate lawyers. The main character is hiring attorneys much in the same way that I have described. His secretary asks him, "What are you looking for?" And he replies, "Another me." This is a good example of hiring attorneys having a very narrow idea of what a valuable skill set is and how that person will present themselves. usually looks exactly like them.
So now on the screen you can see the kind of header image for a bunch of TV shows that are related to law. While we can write some of this off as just being entertainment or popular culture, we think that the way lawyers are presented in these TV shows actually functions in a feedback loop with the industry itself. So our conception as a society of who a lawyer is, what that person looks like, how they dress, how they act, how they speak, and really contributes to our idea of what a successful and competent lawyer is at the end of the day. And this is definitely a point that we wanted to highlight in terms of understanding really our cultural conception of lawyer. Next, we also wanted to use some theoretical frameworks from some of the authors we've read in class in order to think through our critique of the hiring process. Beginning with the normate template, which is an idea that Amy Hemray spoke with us about. The normate is what happens when the normal is designated as the correct or the good in contrast to the pathological or the normal. So the normate becomes, transforms the statistical average into a power claim that uses difference in order to oppress. And certain groups that have power, historically or culturally, get to define the norm and thus get to exclude any bodies or ways of being that are non-conforming. The normate template is then implicated in this idea of kairotic spaces, which is something that Margaret Price discusses. These spaces are informal and unnoticed, but they are places where knowledge is created and power is exchanged. There are rigid expectations governing appropriate behavior and what it means to succeed in kairotic spaces. And not everyone is equal in these spaces. So disabled people are often singled out and punished for not conforming into that specific normate mold. In the hiring process, we can see that this is definitely a relevant theoretical idea. There are, like Eleanor mentioned earlier, explicit evaluation criteria and job requirements, but there are also a host of other requirements that are unstated and implicit that are used just as equally as a measure of candidates kind of fulfilling that job criteria. So kairotic space becomes a way that the normate template is embodied in this hiring structure and a mechanism of exclusion. So as we worked through our critique of the hiring process, we realized that a lot of the problems we were looking at are historical and cultural. Ableism works alongside many other systems of oppression and domination. And as a result, the solution that we want to imagine must occur on multiple timelines and on individual, organizational, and societal levels. Beginning with the short term, we thought it would be productive to create a candidate and employer consulting firm. So on the employer end, we would like to create an access audit for employers, which would give them a firm idea of where they stand beyond just legal compliance. Additionally, we would recommend an internal review of evaluation criteria to ensure that everything the firm is using to judge their candidates is actually critical to the job function. Thirdly, we would like to expand interview options. So we would like to make writing samples more a larger component of the hiring process, like to make it an option to do phone conversations, and we would like to think about making the on-campus interview process less strenuous and potentially shorter. Lastly, we think bias trainings could be very useful for both the HR staff and existing lawyers at these firms in order to help everyone be more inclusive and see value beyond the existing employee mold. And although we want to change the culture on a larger scale and at a firm level, we also want to help prospective candidates get jobs now. In order to change the conversations and ideas that are happening at these law firms, we need to be able to get into those rooms. As a result, our consulting firm would also include a candidate mentorship component. Part of this would be a know your rights framework. Because the ADA currently protects candidates from discrimination during the hiring process, that legal kind of structure is already in place. However, there is substantial burden on candidates who need accommodations to know their accommodations, know how to request them, prove that they need accommodations, prove that those requests are reasonable. And it's very difficult to navigate that correctly. So as a consulting firm, we would want to be available to candidates to help mentor and guide them through that process. And beyond these short-term efforts, we also want to take some time to think about what long-term structural changes might look like for the legal hiring process. First of all, we do want to mention that this is a total team effort. Making the hiring process more accessible is only helpful if we also make the higher education process more accessible. If we reduce bias in college admissions and improve public education and make K through 12 programming more widely accessible on a nationwide level. Additionally, we need to do the work in order to change internal worlds. In the words of LPS, who we've been reflecting on near the end of this quarter, we need to see crit bodies as gifts, brilliant, fierce, skilled, valuable assets that teach us things that are relevant and vital to ourselves. We need to portray different ways of being in popular culture and in media. We need to break down normative ideas about success and competency. And ultimately, we hope that this will help us recognize as a society that differently abled people are valuable and meaningful contributors in many ways.
And so with that, thank you for a great quarter and thank you for listening to our presentation.